How's my volume? Can you hear me okay? So, good evening. Having this experience of rushing around to be here so we can sit and do nothing for half an hour. There's some irony in that. So, if we haven't met, I'm Gullu. Will be guiding us this evening and do a little bit of meditation, some guidance, and then I have a Dharma reflection that I want to share with you, and we'll have time for some conversation. These moments of transition, like just feeling, it's actually teaching another thing. So it's not like coming from other kinds of work I do that's very heady, but there was the act of having to get into the car, transferring the Zoom call to my phone, like driving and semi-participating. So for these moments of transition, sometimes I like to make sound as a way of bringing the system into more regulation. And my favorite, and many of you have done this with me in the past, is um, the sound of a foghorn. So the way this works is everyone takes a deep, very deep breath, kind of like the deepest breath you can, and then you let the sound out slowly, but it's more or less resembles the sound of a foghorn. And because we'll all take a breath at different times, the sound should kind of hang in the air. And because I'm mic'd, it means you all have to be louder so that I'm not just hearing myself. So something like this. So let's do that together. Last breath. Bringing your attention to the echoes of that vibration, especially any echoes that appear in the body. Vibration or tingling or pulsation. And then noticing that the body is connected to the earth. You can feel pressure on the feet. You can feel pressure on the tailbone. And yield to gravity by allowing the shoulders to drop down even ever so slightly. Taking a moment to notice any part of the body that where there's tension or holding. And on the exhale breath, inviting a softening, just a gentle intention to soften, to settle. And then taking a moment to notice the attitude of the mind, the mood of the mind. There's some problem to be fixed. There too much energy in the mind, distracted, scattered, agitated, or too little energy in the mind, sleepy or dull, somewhere in between. And then letting the attention rest on the feeling of the breath, moving in and out of the body. Just simplifying our mode of engagement with the inner and outer world. From many things to just breathing in, aware of the in-breath, breathing out, aware of the out-breath. And everything else more or less rests in the background. Just letting go of any agenda. And just relaxing into a friendly, receptive mode. Or just receiving the sensations of the breathing body. And it's very simple. Breathing in, knowing, feeling, sensing the in-breath. Breathing out, knowing, feeling, sensing the out breath. Nowhere we have to go, nothing we have to get or get rid of, no one we have to be. Just resting in this moment of aliveness. And every time you notice that the attention has wandered, it's not a problem. Just simply begin again. Attention resting on the felt sense of the breathing body. Everything else more or less in the background. And be really helpful to be interested in the process of breathing. Seeing what you can notice about the breath. You can notice without any judgment if the breath is shallow or deep. Maybe you can notice if the breath has a texture, sometimes more viscous, sometimes more airy or fine. And then noticing if there's a rhythm to the breath, or maybe that's constantly shifting. Perhaps noticing how the inhale feels different from the exhale. Maybe even some subtle differences in the breath within the cycle of inhale or exhale. Changing sensation of filling the lungs and emptying the lungs. Maybe different parts of the body highlighted, different places in the cycle of breathing. Maybe you can notice the different energetic. The inhale tends to be invigorating, enlivening. And the exhale tends to be calming. Maybe noticing moments of stillness within the continual movement of the breath. You might notice parts of the body where the breath is quite prominent, maybe the belly or the chest, or at the nose. And maybe places where the breath is quite subtle. Some movement in the shoulders, movement in the back of the body, expansion and contraction of the ribs, maybe. Um, all this investigation within the simplicity of breathing in, feeling the in breath, breathing out, feeling the out breath. Letting the practice be restful, steady, gentle effort. Body continues to relax. Mind continues to soften. As we come to the end of our period of formal meditation, take a moment to reflect on something that you're grateful for. If it's a person or another living being, feeling into the felt sense of being in their presence. Or if it's something else, bringing it to mind in whatever way you can. And then connecting with gratitude as a feeling in the body. Noticing where gratitude resides in the body. Feeling tone, the energetic of it. And if gratitude has a specific location, if it's bounded in some way, maybe a gentle invitation to expand that boundary so that more and more of the body can be filled with the goodness of gratitude. And letting the inner smile of gratitude come forward into even the slightest outward expression of a smile, the half smile of the Buddha. And letting the sound of the bell guide the attention outward. Thank you for your practice and just inviting you to move the body in any way that feels helpful. Feel free to shift around, find a different posture. So I've been these last few days, I was like involved in something that I've not been involved in before. It's me calling it a householder retreat. So had 3 hours with folks on Sunday just to kind of set the stage for this retreat, and then an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we introduced some sort of daily life practice tips in the morning, did a little meditation, some talking about um, how to practice in the midst of our life, and then sort of regrouping at the end. So I've been very focused on, like how do we, this has actually been something I've personally been focused on for probably about 30 years of how do we take the Buddhist teachings farther than just um, learning to calm down, learning to self-regulate, learning to like have some modicum of well-being. Um, so that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I'm going to actually read you excerpts from uh, a teaching from the Buddha. It's called the Devitaka Sutta, two types of thinking. So all these teachings from the Buddha, they're like little vignettes, and for 400 or 500 years, this was all an oral tradition. It was really written down for several hundred years after the life of the Buddha. So they have a certain kind of style, uh, and they tend to be very repetitive. I'll take out some of the repetition, but like a song, is repetitive, and the repetition actually helps you learn it. Um, so this one starts, I have heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. So often these teachings start with a setting, but there's in a particular place. These places become familiar. Um, there he addressed the monks. Times I'll say practitioners to make it more relevant to us. So the Blessed One said, practitioners, before my self-awakening, when I was still just an unawakened bodhisattva, the thought occurred to me, why don't I keep dividing my thinking into two sorts? So I made thinking imbued with sensuality, thinking imbued with ill will, thinking imbued with harmfulness, one sort, and thinking imbued with enunciation, non-ill will, and thinking imbued with harmlessness, another sort. Um, Another theme in the teachings is this notion that different words we use, here it's sensuality, ill will, and harmfulness. You'll also hear words like greed, hatred, and delusion, greed, aversion, confusion, um, primary drivers of human suffering in this realm. Very easy to see if we look at things that are plaguing us as a collective. Uh, it's not at all hard to see how it's driven by greed, how it's driven by hatred or ill will, and the delusion that, we aren't all interconnected in some way, and not seeing the effects of our actions. Um, just start with just the climate, like just this disconnection where we're not seeing the way we're living is doing destruction. So if we care about the world, I think most of us probably do, um, it starts with identifying these streams in our own heart. We all have these streams of, maybe greed, hatred, and delusion are too strong a word, but um, the things that we desire or clamor for have to have at any cost. The things we don't like, the things we want to get rid of, and the ways where we're just not quite integrated in our understanding. So this turns out to be the basis for the teaching of wise view, that we can take states of mind. Here he's talking about thoughts. We could take thoughts, divide them into categories. We can also take states of mind, divide them into categories. We can also take actions of body, speech, and mind and divide them into two categories. And one category we call like wholesome, it's kind of an old-fashioned word, but uh, skillful in the Pali language, kusala, so leading to the benefit of ourselves and to the benefit of others, leading to the welfare of ourselves, welfare of others. Uh, and then unwholesome, unskillful, akusala, leading to the affliction of others. So it turns out to be really like helpful to pay attention to what's happening in the mind, not with any sort of like judgment or uh, not even with like a kind of idea that we're going to fix it, but more just to gather data. So the Buddha goes on, as I remained heedful, ardent, and resolute, thinking imbued with sensuality arose in me. I discerned that thinking imbued with sensuality has arisen in me. I discerned that it leads to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or the affliction of both. It obstructs discernment, for most vexation does not lead to unbinding. So far, I was just noticing. Yeah. As I noticed that it leads to my own affliction, it subsided. As I noticed it leads to the affliction of others, to the affliction of both, just repeats, it obstructs discernment, promotes vexation, does not lead to unbinding, it subsided. Whenever thinking imbued with sensuality had arisen, I simply abandoned it. Um, and This also turns out to be kind of the central teaching of the Buddha, to turn towards that which is vex vexating, causes vexation, that which causes stress, distress, that feeling of unsatisfactoriness that is a through line of life. And it's a little bit like I've talked about this group before. One of the best interventions for smoking cessation is mindful smoking. That I forget what the numbers are. Something like the gold standard for the American Heart Association has like a 33% success rate, and then mindful smoking is in the 40s. And mindful smoking is basically you can smoke whenever you want. You just can't do it while you're drinking, or you can't do it in community. And when you smoke, to be fully aware of the experience of smoking, to be like deeply connected with the felt sense of smoking, the smell, the all the things that go into smoking. And then it turns out that some 40 some percent people realize it's not so great. And that becomes a kind of catalyst for abandoning the habit. Something similar happens in our meditation practice or in our daily life walking around practice. If we monitor our state of mind, last week I talked about it more generally, like we can notice the mind that's filled with greed, the mind that's filled with aversion, the mind that's filled with delusion. Uh, and this is data that we're gathering that gets processed some ineffable way, like maybe the level of the heart, maybe the level of the subconscious and subliminal spaces. Um, doesn't have to be a intellectual kind of understanding or a knowing. It's like, when a small child touches a stove, there's like a learning that happens. It's not conceptual. It's like, ouch, this is no good. And, we don't do that again, intentionally at least. So part of this practice is highlighting those things that burn in some way. So, in the spirit of repetition, it goes on, it talks the same words about uh, thinking with ill will, uh, it's arisen, discerned that it is arisen. This is sort of like the key practice instruction here. We discern when this kind of thinking has arisen. And then the same thing with thinking for harmfulness, thinking imbued with harmfulness. And then maybe my favorite line, and one of my favorite lines in all of the teaching, Whatever a person keeps pursuing with their thinking and pondering, that becomes the inclination of their awareness. If a person keeps pursuing thinking imbued with sensuality, abandoning thinking imbued with renunciation, their mind is bent by that thinking imbued with sensuality. Whatever a person keeps pursuing with their thinking and pondering, that becomes the inclination of their awareness. This turns out to be so helpful in understanding when we live in an environment where there are so many distressing things calling for our attention. There's like an invitation to practice kind of stewardship, to pay attention to what we're consuming, because that then colors our mind. The neuroscientists say something similar. They say when neurons fire together, they wire together, that we build these neural pathways. So whatever we're practicing, we actually become really good at. So if we're practicing a lot of doom scrolling, we get really good at being anxious and depressed. Um, so this ties in with another sort of like real world practical teaching, which is the teaching of wise effort, or the four wise efforts. Uh, the four wise efforts are to arouse wholesome states of mind, wholesome ways of thinking that, you know, and, sometimes this is described in terms of ethics. So not killing, not stealing, not lying, not abusing people or exploiting them in any way, and keeping the mind clear, not using intoxicants that dull the mind or lead to heedlessness. That's like you can always put those things in the universally wholesome category. And often what's unwholesome is just the not of those things, you know, so, or the active not restraining from those things. So engaging in violence, theft, or um, dishonesty. Whatever a person keeps pursuing with their thinking and pondering, that becomes the inclination of the awareness. Let's see what else is in here. If one keeps pursuing thinking imbued with renunciation, abandoning thinking imbued with sensuality, the mind is bent by thinking imbued with renunciation. A lot of colorful imagery in here, but really that's what I wanted to introduce, this idea that, like, I used to think that my state of mind or my moods or how I was relating to the world was just sort of, I mean, I didn't give it much thought. It was like if I woke up and I was grumpy, I was just grumpy. Like that was just the reality of that day. Today's going to be a grumpy day. Um, or today's going to be a sad day or whatever. And there's like two sides of practice here. Like one side of practice is, can we be completely at ease no matter how things are? Like developing this capacity to be with what's unpleasant without it shaking us. Or if we get shaken by the difficulty we experience, we, right ourselves more quickly. And this tends to be the emphasis of practice spaces like this, because it's like pretty good skill to have in a challenging, complex, scary world. Um, the conundrum that the Buddha was trying to solve, like how do we live in a realm where the body is subject to illness, death, everything we hold dear we will be separated with one way or another, that we get things we don't want, just the kind of like cold facts of what it is to be a human being. And so one of the answers is we cultivate this steadiness, this unperturbability, that we can keep the mind steady, we can keep the body in more or less regulated equilibrium in the midst of the vicissitudes of life. And then the other part of practice, which I think is sometimes less emphasized, is what's our agency in changing the channel, I like to say. Yeah. My mind is on the channel of doom and gloom, which honestly it often is. I don't know why it wouldn't be, because doom and gloom is kind of surrounding us. Um, that I can change the channel. Yeah. I can think of something that brings joy. I can think of something that I'm grateful for. I can think thoughts of goodwill. I can think about, the people I care about and wishing them well. Uh, of I only use social media mainly to promote things. It's kind of like a occupational hazard of being a Dharma teacher is that I'm like offering lots of things and sometimes I get people to sign up. But so I'm on there, but only for limited times. But nonetheless, I've curated my Instagram feed so that it's mostly quotes from Buddhist teachers and comedians and animal videos. So I have a favorite, which is it's like a 15-minute YouTube clip of um, a cat sitting in the lap of a sloth, and the sloth is just petting the cat. For good, like a good solid 20 minutes. Like sloths are very patient and very slow. And this is medicine for me, like this is actually like trying to flip the insidiousness of social media on its head and use it in a way that is nourishing. Yeah. So an encouragement to all of you, like if you are involved in these arenas, it will show you what you like and what you watch. So be careful what you like and what you watch. In a moment of carelessness, um, YouTube Shorts, I watched a video that was a collection of horrible traffic accidents that were captured with dash cams, either the dash cam behind where the accident is happening, where you just see it in excruciating detail, or in the car itself. And it just captured my attention because it's like a train wreck, your mind just wants to see. And then for days, it was just like it was getting tractor trailers flipping over, motorcycle. A lot of these things happen in Russia. So I guess everyone in Russia has a dash cam. So you just watch and I mean, I don't want to generalize because maybe this happens all over the world, but uh, the ones that appear to be in places like Russia, like a 18-wheeler will be driving down the road and then like the wheels will just fall off. Like these things are in such disrepair and it's just chaos. Um, which is just to say that like this is part of what it means to care for yourself, to have mindfulness, to pay attention to what you're consuming and the impact on what you're consuming has on your sense of well-being. So the four wise efforts are to arouse wholesome states of mind and keep them sustained. Try to keep the mind in the direction of wholesome. And wholesome includes compassion. So if we are aware of some profound suffering, any suffering, but profound suffering is on offer in many places, that we orient ourselves to it with this uh, of like The way I described it is like I see this suffering and I'm aligning with the heart's wish that it be alleviated, which is very different from pity or kind of like taking on the sorrow of what we're watching in a way that is collapsing or draining. Is that for me a kind of razor's edge to, because the heart naturally attunes, like we naturally feel that, but a little bit of stewardship to keep it in the realm of connecting with the wish for freedom is a wholesome mind state. So it's like we're, instead of connecting with the suffering in the experience, we're connecting with the love that's in the experience. So arousing wholesome states of mind. First, just noticing how often the mind toggles about. Uh, and then abandoning unwholesome states. So there's the, sometimes the strategy of changing the channel. Sometimes it's just the strategy of bringing awareness to the pain in it. Like you get really angry, you bring awareness to the physical experience of being angry. It's like, it's very unpleasant. Anger is a little tricky because there's a moment of empowerment. There's a moment of like adrenaline rush, or sometimes it brings a little bit of true or false clarity. Um, but in the end, it's exhausting. And the Buddha likened it. Two things he said about anger I like. One is that it's an arrow with a honey tip and a poison root, and it's also like a sickness. So sometimes we can change the channel, but sometimes we just have to bring a kind of, kind, caring awareness to that experience, to sit in the fire of it a little bit without feeding it, so those energies can move through us. And grief is kind of this way. You can change the channel so much on grief, but it, it's got to have its day in court. Um, so the act of abandoning unwholesome mind states begins by being aware of them. And maybe I'll just end with many of you have probably heard of RAIN, the acronym. I have a variation on that, which is RAFT. So RAFT is recognize, bring mindfulness to the experience. Usually we talk about this with afflictive experiences. So we bring mindfulness to recognize this is anger, this is ill will, this is irritation, agitation, wherever it is in the stream of things. And then the allow, the A in raft is also allow. So instinctively, when something is unpleasant, there's a kind of natural resistance. We want to push it away. We want to fix it. So just for this moment, abandoning that effort. And it is just for this moment to allow to not be in contention with this moment's experience. And then F, to feel this experience and like the gestalt of it, like as a whole, what's the feeling here? And then T is a more discerning investigation. Um, T stands for tease apart. So recognize, allow, feel, and then tease apart. And the easiest way to tease apart an experience is that we can notice that there's a story, there's a thought, there's a narrative. Can identify that narrative. May or not be true. If it's obviously false, it's kind of good to recognize that. Um, but quite often it's true, like I think about if I'm upset about something that's happening in the world or something that's happening to me, like the thing is actually happening. So the kind of hard to talk yourself out of it. So the encouragement in this meditative process is to notice the story, but don't get involved in it. Let those thoughts be there. Bring the awareness to the emotional level, sensations that we understand and recognize as anger, sadness, whatever it might be. And then the coup d'etat is to bring the awareness to the most discrete manifestation of that experience, tingling, vibration, pressure, temperature, tension, relaxation. Um, and one thing is, it turns out it's almost always easier to be with tension, vibration, pressure than it is to be with stories that we concoct about, uh, with stories that we have about what's ailing us, and often more difficult, easier to manage than powerful emotions. So that's my encouragement to you all. Notice the attitude of the mind, notice the state of the mind, identify what's wholesome, skillful, kusala, leading to your own benefit, your own well-being. Identify what's unwholesome, unskillful, akusala, and try to shift the balance, more skillful, less unskillful. So I'd love to hear any comments or reactions.